same ancestor that I have to the father, if that makes sense.
Okay,
So
if you need help on that, give me a holler.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it, Tia.
Is Ramos?
Yes.
Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Yes,
Thank you.
welcome, Patricia.
Looking to see my, oh, there he is. He's here. Okay.
He's here. He was the first one that he was here when I opened up the meeting room at around 6:30. So let's see here. We got to get any more. Let's see. Let's give everybody a minute or two more here. Hey TL, how are you doing?
Wonderful.
Good.
I hadn't seen you in so long.
I know. It's been a
Where
long
you been
time.
hiding out at?
Hi
Thank you.
Ted, how are you tonight?
I'm doing good.
Good. I am too.
Those of you that got the picture from me this
From
afternoon,
Tom, we thank you.
yeah,
both of
Tom's
you.
the one who got it for us.
Yeah.
Tom's wife did a good job.
Yep. She
She
took
did.
the picture.
I'd like
Oh.
to hire just to take pictures around the meetings.
Yeah. Okay, so I think why don't we go ahead and get started here. Let's see here.
Mr. Bloss, you gonna record?
What did you say, Blas?
You gonna
I
record?
think I'm already doing it. It's blinking up here.
Okay.
Can you see it? Be sure I'm not.
I see it.
Okay.
Okay.
By the way, we are recording. It's primarily for Blas, who's the secretary, to do us a really nice job on our minutes and things. But we don't, distribute this out particularly or anything, but we do keep them. So just FYI there. Hey, Bob Milwee, how are you?
Very good. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fine. I checked yesterday or the day before, and your application's up there at National. So.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate you checking on me.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see if we can get started. If I can figure out how to get this done now. Let's see here. PowerPoint on, figure the displays. Okay, all right. So give me just a second here, and I'll hopefully not mess this up too bad. I actually went through and tried to get this where I wouldn't do this without messing up too much. Okay, let me do this and then get this back. And full screen. And let's see here. Display that one. Share. Okay, got that done. And then go to full screen. Oh,
You're there.
okay. So I think I'm good here. I hope so anyway. Okay, so welcome everyone to our March 2021 chapter meeting. Welcome to all our guests and our friends. We're excited about you being here. And with that, Chaplain Babs, could you give our invocation, please? Don, maybe unmute.
Am I muted?
You're not, you're good now.
Okay. Almighty God, on this occasion, send us your grace and understanding to conduct the business of our society. Allow us words of wisdom and point our paths of directions as we fulfill our roles as guardians of our natural heritage. Join with us as we endeavor to honor the dreams of our forefathers by holding high the light of liberty. And Father, we are careful to give you all the praise and glory. In the name of our Lord, amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Don. Okay, so Al, could you lead us in our pledge to the American flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under
under
God,
God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Al. And Blas, could you lead us in the pledge to the Texas flag?
Yes. Honor the Texas
Honor the
flag.
flag.
I pledge
I pledge
allegiance
allegiance
to Texas, one state, under God,
one
indivisible.
and indivisible.
Okay, and then is Peter on? Peter McClellan? He's not. Okay, well, I'll do this one. Okay, if you'll join with me. We, the descendants of the heroes of the American
Revolution,
Who
by their
sacrifice
established the United States of America, reaffirm
reaffirm
our
our
faith
faith
and principles of
principles of
liberty and our Constitution
Constitution of the Republic
and solemnly
solemnly
pledge
pledge
ourselves
ourselves to
and them
defend
against every foe.
every foe. Okay,
I won.
thank you. So here's our agenda. We've got a relatively full agenda tonight. So we're going to go ahead and get started with it. I guess first up, we're actually being honored by visits from one gentleman and one lady here who I've read their resumes or their bios, and I'm very impressed. So with that, I'm going to go to the next chart, and I'm going to turn it over to Louis Juarez, who's our Vice President of Awards, to give these awards out.
Good evening, everyone. Again, welcome. And our bronze ROTC medal presentation tonight is here for Evelyn Sutton and John Cochran. And I'm going to start with the first bio for Evelyn. She's a cadet Lieutenant Colonel. Evelyn Sutton attends Allen High School, where her studies focus on service academy preparation and military science. Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Sutton is a member of the campus student leadership program and the Math Honor Society. She attends Norton Elementary, Erickson Middle School, and Lowry Freshman Centers, all in Allen, Texas. She has selected as her next regimental commander for the Allen High School Corps of Cadets for 2021 through 2022 school year. And upon assumption of her command, will be promoted to cadet colonel. Upon graduation, Cadet Lieutenant Colonel Sutton plans to attend U.S. Naval Academy and receive a commission as a Marine officer and serve in the counterintelligence field. Her personal awards include the American Legion Bronze Medal for military excellence, the American Veterans Medal, the National Society of the United States Daughters of 1812 Medal, and the Outstanding Cadet Award. With that, I'm going to ask if Cadet Evelyn Sutton has anything to say or any questions, but we're quite honored to have you here.
I'm just very excited to receive this award, and I am very honored for it. So thank you, guys.
Well, we're excited to have you here, and we're glad that you've reached these honors and continue to do well in your studies. Now, what we'll be doing is mailing you the Bronze Star and the medal and the certificate, which I think we'll be showing it to you here after I get done reading the bio for John Cochran. John, are you present?
Yes, sir.
Okay, welcome. How are you tonight?
I'm doing wonderful. How about yourself?
Good. Okay, let me introduce your bio to everyone. John Cochran is a junior at McKinney High School. He has been an active member of the Marine Corps Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps program and has completed as part of the Arms Drill Team, the Marksman Team, and the Physical Training Team at MHS. He is also a member of the wrestling team, has goals after high school, including attending a four-year university to study logistics and supply chain management while supporting while participating in a reserve officers training corps program. Upon graduation, commissioned as an officer in the armed forces. In his free time, John enjoys learning about a broad range of topics, including emergency medicine and volunteering with veterans organizations such as the Carry Load for our annual Memorial Day event. And I should have mentioned his instructor is Trish Ramos, gunnery sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, retired. And John, I just wanted to say great accomplishments on your part as well. We're happy to have you here. And we are proud to have both of you. And I was going to ask if, Tom, do you have those awards we could show them?
I do, but I thought maybe we'd see if John had a few comments
Yes.
first.
Do you have any comments, John?
I'm very honored to receive this. Thank you all very much. And yeah, that's really about it.
Okay, all right. Okay, so let's see if I can pull this off now.
All right, great. One thing I meant to mention, I'll be forwarding information for scholarship applications essays that both of you may be able to apply for here in your this next fiscal year.
So, yeah, we would definitely support you in doing that. Probably, Louis, you can probably get back in touch with them and tell them a little more details about that.
Yeah, I'm gonna send that to their instructors and give them some information.
That works out good. Yeah, I like that. That works out good. So anyway, so as Louis was saying, I had this medal before. This is basically the ROTC medal that both of you will be receiving via mail, and then also over here there's a little description of when this actually was started in 1933 in the SAR as a silver medal primarily for college and universities, but in 1965 they expanded it to junior ROTC programs. And it's the medals endeavor to foster the principles of the citizen soldier exemplified by the Minutemen. So with that, let me just go over here and Evelyn, this is your certificate, and we will be, like I said, I'll be putting that in the mail to you, so you will get that shortly. And I know you and your parents and friends and acquaintances are very proud of you. As I am, and as our chapter of the SAR is. To a man, I can tell you that. And then here's yours, John. And same thing. I know your family's proud of you, and we're proud of you. We really work hard at trying to find qualified applicants for these medals, and y'all definitely are right there at the top. So thank you so much. Y'all are welcome to stay if you'd like to hear the presentation in a moment. It's going to be about the Battle of Kings Mountain and then the development of the National Military Park there over the years. And Lamar, who just put his hand up there, Lamar Tate's going to be giving us that. So anyway, so that's it. And Really appreciate it and appreciate your family and friends coming there. Do either one of you have any final comments, or your family, either one?
Hey, Mr. Milton, I'd like to say something, please.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay, so I am the one of the Marine instructors at McKinney High School. Cadet Corcoran has been one of my students since freshman year. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Ms. Sutton on also receiving the Sons of the American Revolution Bronze Award. Great job. I know Allen High School over there has a great program. Really close friends with the instructors over there. And so, definitely want to congratulate you on a job well done. And, you look like you're definitely on a path of, like nothing's going to stop you. So all I say is keep going and don't let anything get in your way. And when people tell you, you can't do it, tell them to hold my water and watch this. Yes. So, and to Cadet Corcoran, I want to say, hey, you've done such a phenomenal job. You have, you've been motivated and driven since day one, and we're so proud of you to have nominated you for this award. And it's definitely, you're well deserving of this. And all I want to say is just like continue to push yourself and to achieve whatever it is that you set out for. And I know that anything that you do want to accomplish in life, that you will get there. And to this organization, thank you guys so much for allowing us to recognize those deserving cadets who really, just focus on being the best person that they can possibly be. A lot of these cadets that we do put in for these awards for all of these organizations are definitely bound for the military. So I feel like this really reinforces everything that you guys stand for and continue to, uphold everything that the United States of America stands for as well. So thank you guys so much for supporting our program, supporting the program over at Allen High School. You guys are, obviously very well ingrained in, just continuing to not only just put your program out there, your organization, and highlight it, but also, it allows these students to understand, where, everything stems from. So we're so grateful for you guys to always supporting us, and we look forward to many more opportunities and being able to support you guys as well.
Thank you so much, Patricia. And I've got to say, I'm always overwhelmed when I come over, while we could still come over to the school and see what you do with these guys, because it's just really amazing. So thank you so much. Keep up all the good work. So
thank you.
Tom, I wanted to see if is Bruce Cole with us tonight? I forgot to recognize him.
Know what he is. Let's see. No, I don't see his name here. No.
Okay, he's the instructor from Allen, so I guess he's not with us tonight. So okay. So I think let's see here. Instead of me trying to get back and share the screen, since I have it unshared, I think what we'll do is hey, Mark, if it's okay with you all, let's go ahead and introduce Lamar. Is that okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay.
Our program tonight is on the Battle of Kings Mountain, which occurred in September of 1780. And it was a pivotal point in the Revolutionary War. Our presenter probably has the best job of any job you can have. He is a park ranger for a national military park. Now, he has to wear a lot of different hats with that, but for me, it would be a fascinating job to have. I've never been to visit, but it's my understanding it's on the border of South Carolina and North Carolina. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce to y'all Lamar Tate, and thank you, Mr. Tate, for presenting for us this evening.
All right, that's my pleasure. I enjoy this kind of stuff. Just a little background on me so you know where I'm coming from. I'm not a permanent park employee. I'm a part-timer. I've been working for the Park Service for about 8 or 9 years now at different sites. I started out at Cape Hatteras, about 6 months out there. Then I worked about 1.5 years at the battlefield of Cowpens as a part-timer. And then I came to Kings Mountain, actually when my boss lady went out with a baby. So, they needed a body, and they asked me if I come up here, and I said, sure. So I came up here, and I've been working here ever since. And I'm working full time, but in theory, I'm a part-time employee. But I've never had a better gig. I did a lot of years in the service. Like I was telling young Mr. Cochran there earlier, I did a lot of cool stuff in the service, but nothing beats this, where you can jibber jabber with an expert in firearms or research in the Revolutionary War or World War II or whatever. The visitor that comes out here is surprisingly very like any other national park. But here you get into a conversation. A lot of times it's military oriented. And I always ask people where they come from. And when I find out somebody's got some background that I'm interested in, that opens up the floodgate of conversation. So anyway, I'll keep talking forever. So I'm at Kings Mountain now. I'm actually in the visitor center. I'm probably the only one in our 4,000 acres of land that's still in the park boundary now. And we're going to have some limitations here because we're talking on a computer, and and we have a certain amount of time, and I'm probably going to go over that anyway. So I'll stop right there and tell you what I'm going to talk about. We're going to do a very brief coverage of the first and second British efforts in the Southern colonies. There's two distinctly different periods of time and campaigns that they're mounting to squash opposition in the colonies in the South. And then we're going to discuss for the second version of it, the flow of events as they evolve and as it leads to what becomes the Battle of Kings Mountain. Hopefully a little bit of aftermath. I'm probably going to miss some things. And then the battle itself is going to be very brief because it's really a kind of a simple engagement. We'll talk a little bit about archaeology, not much about that because a lot of stuff that I would probably show, I'd have to get out of the PowerPoint and back in. But commemoration and park development is very interesting. There's some neat timelines in there. And then if we get a chance to talk about personalities, weapons and that kind of stuff as time permits. I don't go over too much. So I'm ready there, Mr. Milson or Tom.
Yeah.
And to get started.
Okay, I'll go. You should be able to control the screen, I believe now.
Okay, so I'm sharing, and there, and let's see.
And while he's doing that, could I ask everybody to go ahead and mute? We're getting some background noise, and then except for you, Lamar, but everybody else, please mute. So we can cut out some of the dogs and other things there. Thank you.
Okay. I'm trying to find it now. Let me go to my cheat sheet. You can tell I'm a mental midget when it comes to computers.
You're doing great, Lamar.
Yeah, you don't have anything yet, do you?
No.
Okay, there it is. How's that?
It's good. There you go. Your first slide just came up.
Okay. So welcome to Kings Mountain National Military Park. Everything's virtual nowadays. That's the way the Park Service is going, especially given the pandemonium of the last year. And it's probably going to continue like that for a while. So I'm your tour guide, and today is the 18th, and there me is. I'd put my picture in there if I knew how to do it. So this is the Carolinas, North Carolina, South Carolina. This is a map that dates from close to the mid 1800s, and it doesn't have a date on it. I don't know where the guy that made this got it, but it was a volunteer that worked here about 5 years ago. And if you look right here where the mouse is moving around, that's Lincoln County. Okay, the lower half or lower 2/3 of Lincoln County is Gaston County today. That's where I live. And speaking of that, I'm from the big city of Dallas. That get anybody's attention? Which is located in Gaston
County. You fooled me the other day, yesterday or today, I guess.
So anyway, that's where I'm from. But we're actually down here right about where that star is, where it has Kings Mountain, Battle of Kings Mountain. So the British campaign in the South begins at the beginning of the war. And the idea, what leads them to do this is first, there's a lot of raw materials, natural resources, tar, pitch, lumber, turpentine. The British have a blue water navy, you could say, around the world, and those are the raw materials they need. And so you got people in Parliament in England arguing about letting the northern colonies go, keep these, let those rebellious troublemakers go, and keep those rich southern colonies under crown control. So what the British are doing is they're going to put down this hotbed of rebel activity in the Wilmington, North Carolina area, right there on the coastline. That's where the Cape Fear River runs past the town, about 30 miles, 25 miles, give or take, downriver. It runs out into the ocean. And so that is a hotbed of rebel activity. So the British are getting this idea that you are loyal to the population from the royal governors of all 4 southern colonies, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Virginia. All the governors are saying that. Now, is that true? We don't know. We'll find out. So the governors are probably putting that out because, you know, they got kicked out of their office and they want to reassert royal authority in their colony. So there is something to that, I think. So what they're saying is they just need the colors to show up, some soldiers, and they'll rise to the occasion and support the king. So the Navy is going to arrive in Wilmington, North Carolina with a bunch of soldiers. Well, because it's a military operation, it's going to not go off like you want. It's going to cost more, not probably go according to plan. It's going to be late. And the same thing happens in the 18th century as it happens in the 20th, 21st century. The British Navy shows up off of Wilmington on about the 12th of March, 1776. And what they learn is that there's supporting elements, the citizens, the loyal subjects, the friends of government that are expected to support them have risen up and marched down to Wilmington to suppress the rebellious elements. And these are Scots Highlanders mostly, all the way up and down the Cape Fear River Valley, all the way up to what is modern day Fayetteville, North Carolina. And at the time, that little whatever community it is called Cross Keys, it seems. But they marched down and they are met, skillfully maneuvered and met and defeated by rebel forces at the Battle of Morris Creek Bridge in late February 1776. So the British have already, their plan in the South has already stumbled. So the Loyalists did not allow the army to show up. They marched and they were defeated by rebel forces or patriots. So let me find my mouse again. There it is. So we're down here at Wilmington, North Carolina. Well, the British Navy is sitting offshore and they ponder what they're going to do. And back in the days of wooden ships and iron men, you had to wait on the wind to work the right way, the water to work the right way before a force could start moving. But in the meantime, in the several weeks they're sitting there, they have mounted a reconnaissance expedition by 2 ships that go down to this little point down here. You can see my mouse moving around, Charleston, South Carolina. Well, Charleston in the colonial period is probably the richest town or city in the colonies. In all 13 English colonies, Charleston trumps them all. That's where that's money, that's wealth, that's power. So they decide that they are going to sail on down there and they're going to mount an operation against an incomplete fort at the mouth of the harbor. And that fort at the time is called Fort Sullivan. I don't know how many of y'all have been to Charleston, South Carolina, but you know, it's like the coast of North Carolina. There's not a lot of hard land around there, but there is some good beaches and some solid land. So the British operation that flows from what is Wilmington, North Carolina, down to what is Charleston, South Carolina, is going to stumble right here at Sullivan's Island. So if you came out of the harbor of Charleston, you would be going right past Sullivan's Island. And nowadays you look over to the right and you see a brick fort, that's Fort Sumter. Over to the left, you see a earthen fort. Well, it's brick now, but it was earthen at the time. And that fort, again, is commanded by a guy named William Moultrie. So this is going to be an actual combined operation, a real combined operation for the 18th century anyway. It's going to be naval forces down here with naval artillery against this earthen fort that's still under construction. And land forces are going to be put off on Long Island, up at the top of the screen on the right. Long Island today is the Isle of Palms. Well, it looks a lot wider and marshier in between, in here, between the islands. Nowadays, there's a strip of water that runs in there, gets bigger during high tide, smaller during low tide. But the British forces are led to believe that they can march across that at low tide. It's 1.5 feet deep. Well, when the land forces get there, they discover that it's not 1.5 feet deep, it's 7 feet deep, maybe 8 feet deep. Soldiers cannot ford that. So the British forces trying to cross by boats that they use to land on Long Island. And this battle at what is called Breach Inlet today, it's Breach Inlet back then, but the Battle of Breach Inlet is probably the most significant battle that takes place in the first 2 years of the war in the Southern Theater, because that stymies the land part of the operation and allows the battle down at Fort Moultrie, later on that's what it's called, to be a naval artillery duel with the land-based artillery. The ships take the worser of the damage or the hits. They pay the cost with a couple of ships lost. One runs aground, I think is burned, and they call off the operation after about 12 hours and sail back north. So what happens now for the next year and a half or so in the Southern Theater is almost nothing. Now, the British mount their second effort in the South after their defeat at Saratoga in October 1777. So the commanding general of all the British forces in North America, Burgoyne, is a prisoner of war. He surrendered to the hero of Saratoga, Horatio Gates. That's the biggest victory that the rebels have over a British force in the whole Revolutionary War, is the defeat at Saratoga. So what happens now is they reevaluate their plan. And so they're going to come south again now. And at the end of 1778, the last day of 1778, they occupy Savannah, Georgia, which is just off the lower tip of the yellow portion of South Carolina. It's a few miles inland from where the Savannah River dumps into the ocean. And so they occupy Savannah, Georgia. Now they have a deep water port, an anchorage, where they can supply their forces in the field, and you guys that are going to rise to the occasion and support the king. Is that a cool story? I think so. So they begin conducting operations into the interior, up the Savannah River, and what is the little bit of Georgia along the Savannah River. Georgia is not really the colony that you think of with boundaries. There's no western boundary at the time. And they're going to conduct operations against rebel forces that are gathering in South Carolina. So these forces are generally operating around the Charleston area, but there's a lot of fighting and skirmishing and small unit engagements that go on between Savannah and Charleston. So the commander of the British forces in Savannah, a guy named Prevost, he sends messages up to the new boss of the British in North America, a guy named Henry Clinton, who's up in New York or somewhere up that way, that he needs some more men. He says, with some more help and a big push, he says, we can squash the rebellion. And so in February 1778, the second version of the British campaign gets up into high gear, and they land large forces, somewhere around 8,000 men, on what is Kiowa Island, which is a barrier island just south of Charleston. And they began to invest the Patriot forces in Charleston, South Carolina. Now, the rebel forces in Charleston are commanded by a guy named Benjamin Lincoln. I don't know if you've heard that name. He's the namesake of Lincoln County up here, and probably most of the Lincolns in the South anyway. And Benjamin Lincoln apparently is a pretty solid dude, but he does some things that scholars today will argue about or bash him for. But by sometime in the latter part of April, mid to latter part of April, the British have crossed the neck of Charleston, meaning Charleston's really on a peninsula with rivers on both sides. When the British cross that neck of Charleston, there's no land supply route. So it's only a matter of time. They've closed off all the water routes. The land routes are closed off. And on May 12, 1780, Benjamin Lincoln surrenders his force. And that's the biggest haul that the British have in the whole Revolutionary War in all 13 colonies, is the capture of the Patriot forces in Charleston, South Carolina. So somewhere around 5,000 or so men go into captivity. All the organized forces, either state or continental line forces that are in Charleston, are prisoners of war. Most of the militia that are captured are paroled, meaning you get a piece of paper, you sign, or your commander signs, you're going to go home and be a good boy for the rest of the war. So everything's going good in this second version of the Southern campaign in Charleston. So Henry Clinton, the commander of all the British in North America, he's overseeing this operation. And he does some things before he heads back up north. Now, nobody writes why he goes up north, but I think he's going up north because it's too hot in Charleston, South Carolina in the summertime. So he heads back up north, but before he leaves, he does some things. He makes some decisions, some appointments. So one of the things he does is he names a successor, and that's Charles Cornwallis. Everybody knows who he is. Super guy, battlefield commander, probably the best the British have during the war. He now commands all the British forces in the South. Henry Clinton also gives you an option. Now, for all you guys that have been bad guys during the time of the war or the rebellion, he's going to allow you to come in, take an oath of allegiance to the king, and we'll start with a clean slate. That's a pretty good deal, isn't it? So he gives you the option. Now, the author of the book, The Road to Guilford Courthouse, John Buchanan, he says that offer of amnesty, that decree, I guess you could say, ignites the backcountry. So all that land away from the coastline in the Carolinas is the backcountry. So part of that decree is that, if you choose not to come in and take an oath of amnesty, you're now the enemy. You're guilty of treason. So part of that oath is if you take that oath of amnesty, you're under the protection of the British forces, but you must support the British forces. Also participate or supply them. You must support the British operations in the Southern Theater. So that upsets a lot of people. So South Carolina, especially North Carolina also, but South Carolina becomes almost a Civil War battleground. There's lots of segments, small groups fighting each other or going to such and such's farm because they didn't like him, and they bushwhack and kill him, burn his house, take all his livestock because they didn't like him. Sometimes it's oriented toward the war. Sometimes it's oriented toward personal gain. But South Carolina can document almost 600 actions in the Revolutionary War, and most of them are in 1780 and 1781. So it's a lot of fighting that goes on in South Carolina. So Henry Clinton leaves Charleston, heads back up north. Cornwallis is now going to begin moving north into South Carolina, and the British established posts from Georgetown all the way across to Augusta and Fort 96, which is up in this area where the mouse is moving around. 96 is the farthest post on the frontier, and it plays a significant role in the Revolution in 1781. That's a whole nother story. But Cornwallis marches north from Charleston, South Carolina, and he's going to be met by the new British commander in the South, a guy named Horatio Gates. He's the hero of Saratoga. Well, Horatio Gates is very handily defeated at the battlefield of Camden by, well, my mouse disappeared, by Cornwallis. So again, is probably the best battlefield commander the British have in the war. So at the Battle of Camden in August of 1780, Horatio Gates disappears off the field almost immediately. Within 2 days, he's ridden 120 miles up to Hillsborough, North Carolina, getting up close to the Virginia line. The army disintegrates. Who's not killed or captured is their refugees. So it takes a while for these guys to drift back in either to their units, wherever they muster, or to get back home. The army is essentially destroyed. So Cornwallis, at the time, after that victory, he writes a letter to his boss, who is up in New York now, Henry Clinton, and he says the road to North Carolina is wide open. So essentially, South Carolina is now under Crown control. Again, the richest city in the colonies is now under Crown control, and the backcountry, the state, or the colony, I guess you could say at the time, is under Crown control. So a very good thing. The operation the British are mounting in the South is working to their advantage. It's working according to plan. Now, is everything peaches and cream in South Carolina? No. This is August of 1780 when the Battle of Camden happens. Well, if you move up here back up into Lincoln County, North Carolina, under the T in north, you have the town of Lincolnton. That's the county seat of what the rebels call Lincoln County now. And just west of modern day Lincolnton, there's an engagement at Jacob Ramseur's mill, and it's all loyalists and all patriots. Okay, not one regular soldier there, and it's almost the size of Kings Mountain in numbers of participants, but it's very lopsided in favor of loyalists numbers wise. However, many of the loyalists, probably a fourth of them, or maybe a third, do not have weapons. They showed up expecting the army to show up, and the army's not there. They got called out again, just like Morris Creek Bridge in 1776. They got called out early, and they were defeated by rebels in about a running 4-hour battle. And that was in June of 1780. Well, in July 1780, you have another engagement that further pumps up the patriots. And this happens down in York County, South Carolina, which is not too far from where we're located. At the home of William Bratton, a guy named Christian Huck shows up, and he's a British officer, but he's commanding provincials and militia forces, and they're looking for William Bratton, who's a partisan leader. And so they go up to the home of William Bratton, and he's not there. He's off in the field somewhere. And they got his wife out on the porch, and she won't tell him where he is. And she's reputed to have said, "I wouldn't tell you if I could, and I couldn't tell you if I would." So one of Huck's men has a sickle to her neck, and I guess he's pushed away finally. And Huck's command rides down the road, maybe a quarter mile, it's not very far, over to a neighboring plantation of a guy named Williamson, and goes into camp. Well, a slave of the Brattons runs off and finds William Bratton, and the rebels come back, and about 10 o'clock that night, they charge into Huck's camp, basically kill a whole bunch of them, including Christian Huck. So that's a victory again for the Patriot forces, and that further pumps up spirits in a summer in which 2 major defeats have happened in South Carolina. So after the Battle of Camden, which is on the 16th of August, over here in roughly the area where Spartanburg County, Union County, and Lawrence County, South Carolina come together, kind of above the S and the O in South Carolina, you have another engagement of rebels and loyalists at the Battle of Musgrove Mill. So Musgrove Mill is a very interesting battle because it's not gigantic, but you have the Patriot forces actually engineering a shooting zone in which a small group of Patriots go out, about 15 or 20 men under a guy named Shadrach Inman. They go out and they start an engagement and they begin withdrawing and they begin running. And the loyalists are chasing them and they run right into a shooting zone where about 60 of these guys are killed and about 90 of them are seriously wounded. So it's about 150 casualties, and probably I'm sure some of those 90 that were seriously wounded passed away. So what happens there is the man that's commanding some of those guys gets wound up about this. And if you back up to the fall of Charleston in May, Henry Clinton appointed a man to a new position, Inspector of Militia of the Southern Provinces. Kind of an interesting title. It's a new job or new appointment in the British forces in the North or the South. And what you have is a British officer who is going to train militia to function more like the British Army. And the man that gets that job is Major Patrick Ferguson. So he's been conducting operations and training loyalists all in the western and upper part of South Carolina. He's essentially, they say, the left flank of Cornwallis's army as he's moving north, but he's very much separated in distance. So I don't know if you'd even call him a left flank. He's another force moving around into the western part of South Carolina. So Patrick Ferguson works his way as far north as Gilberttown, which is just above modern-day Rutherford, and that's the county seat of Rutherford County, which is created by the Patriots forces or the rebels at the same time Lincoln County was created in 1779. So Patrick Ferguson is operating up here in North Carolina, and he has men foraging and scouting as far north as Old Fort in North Carolina, which is up on I-40. So he's very far up into North Carolina compared to his overall commander, Cornwallis, who's sitting over in Charlottetown at this time. So after the Battle of Musgrove Mill on 19 August 1780, you have several engagements in the upper part of South Carolina that serve to pump up Patriot spirits. So after the Battle of Musgrove Mill, Patrick Ferguson has a prisoner, a guy named Samuel Phillips, that he cuts loose. And he's a cousin of Isaac Shelby, who was a commander of Musgrove's Mill. So Isaac Shelby gets a message from this prisoner, his cousin, a guy named Samuel Phillips, that Patrick Ferguson says, you need to stay out of the war or else. If you don't, he's going to march over the mountains, hang your leaders, lay your country waste with fire and sword. It's a verbal message. How much of that is accurate? You know, the people argue that today, that Patrick Ferguson probably never would have sent that message. There's no written account of it until years later. But either way, a message gets to Isaac Shelby, and within a short time, this is about the first week of September 1780, within a short time, units all over the western part of the Carolinas have begun mustering, and with the single goal, not for liberty and independence, but to defeat Patrick Ferguson. So these units will muster in various parts of North and South Carolina, but the first one that actually forms up, and this is a map that doesn't really work for you, but it's the back of the Overmountain Victory Trail brochure that we have. And it shows up on the upper end. This is Abingdon, Virginia. That's the first unit that musters, and it's 2 weeks to the day before the battle that takes place. They march down to Sycamore Shoals in the western part of what is North Carolina at the time. They're going to cross the mountains on the 25th, I think it is, of September. And they're going to cross the mountains, and their goal is to muster with more units from the Piedmont area of North Carolina, what is modern day Elkin here, Wilkesboro. These guys are going to march down and join them too. So I think they march out of Elkin, what is today's Elkin, North Carolina, the day after they march out of Sycamore Shoals. So they arrive down here at what is today's Morganton, North Carolina, but they're at the plantation home of Charles McDowell, who's a partisan leader in the western Piedmont of North Carolina. His plantation is called Quaker Meadows. So they muster there, and the numbers you can people will argue about because there's all different accounts, but the scholars, I think, tend to hover around 14 or 1,500 men, maybe 1,600 men. Either way, it's a very large number of militia to be in one place. So this force that musters is essentially self-supplied on both routes of the march. They don't know where Patrick Ferguson is. The last they know is his headquarters is down here at Gilberttown, above modern-day Rutherford, North Carolina. So at Sycamore Shoals, before they leave, one of the commanders there, a guy by the name of John Sevier, he eventually becomes the first governor of the new state of Tennessee in 1796. He borrows money from the land grant office there in Sycamore Shoals and buys 500 pounds of gunpowder from a lady named Mary Patton. She has a small powder mill, and I guess she can make powder in volume, or it was saved up somehow. But if you ever go to the Tennessee State Historic Site at Sycamore Shoals, they have one of Mary Patton's powder pots in there. It's a big old iron pot that's about 5 feet across. It's very cool. Sycamore Shoals is a very neat historic site. So the column marches across the mountains, and the one from the Piedmont marches to Quaker Meadows, and they eventually muster there. Well, they learn that they need an officer to command, and they don't have an officer in their ranks. So they send Charles McDowell off to Hillsborough, North Carolina, way over here, to see Horatio Gates to elect a commander. Well, they start riding south toward Gilberttown. That's where they believe Ferguson is located. And almost immediately, they elect William Campbell as their commander. So were they trying to get rid of Charles McDowell? People will argue that point. Maybe not the best guy in the field, but good leader. But he's not a good leader, a good man, but he's maybe not the best guy in the field. So they begin marching down to Gilberttown. Well, before they get to Gilberttown, they learn that Patrick Ferguson has probably left. What happened was, in this part of the march, if you can see on the map, there's two lines, the two brown lines. Those are two routes. So this map comes off the Overmap Victory Trail webpage for the Park Service. I think it's the USGS production. But the force broke into two columns to cover both routes, because during the march, almost immediately, two young guys disappear from the column, a guy named Proctor and a guy named Crawford. And they were believed to be spies or not loyal to the rebellion. And next thing you know, they're gone. So that kind of confirms in the minds of all the patriots, the leaders especially, that they may be expected, that Ferguson probably knows they're coming. So either way, they're covering their bases by covering both routes. So as they head down to Gilberttown, they learn that Ferguson probably gone. Well, when they get to Gilberttown, that confirms it. So they spend the night of the 4th of October at Gilberttown. And let's see. Okay. So Gilberttown is about where that lower left, my mouse disappeared on me. There it is. Gilberttown is right in here. So over to the right here is a point called a little mountain outcropping called Flint Hill or Cherry Mountain, depending on, then or now. Now it's called Cherry Mountain. But that's where the South Carolina forces that are falling into this column to participate in the operation have mustered or marched. And so on the 5th of October, the rebel column, let's see, my mouse disappeared again. On the 5th of October, the rebel column makes it down to a ford on the Green River called Alexander's Ford. So they're still in North Carolina, or what is North Carolina land. And they get down there and they go into camp. And they're heading after Gilberttown. They believe that Ferguson is going to 96. So they're heading south into South Carolina, like farther south. So during the night of October 5th into the morning of October 6th, a South Carolina guy who learned that Ferguson is heading east rides from Flint Hill or Cherry Mountain over to Alexander's Ford. He does not know the lay of the land. He does not know any of these commanders by personal acquaintance. So they say he's got a guide, and the guide he doesn't trust. And a lot of the time during the ride, and he leaves at 8 o'clock at night. A lot of time during the ride, they say he's got a gun cocked to this guy's neck because he does not trust the guide. I don't know if it lasts all night like that, but at some point late at night, early in the morning, several hours later, he arrives at Alexander's Ford, gets captured by a picket, blindfolded, taken into camp, tells the column that he's moving east. They know that for a fact. That's the first solid intelligence that the Patriot Force gets during the march. And this is now the 6th of October. So the Patriot Force the next day, let's see, let me get my mouse back. Patriot Force the next day begins following the roads and starts moving east. And on the 6th of October, they march all day. It's raining off and on. And they wind up stopping at a place that you might recognize the name, the Cowpens. So the Cowpens is a site of a battle that takes place about 3 months and a week after the battle that we're getting up to. But they're going through there because that's where the road goes through. So they're following the roads back east. So the commanders have a dilemma because some of these guys, the ones from Western Virginia, have been on the march for 13 days now, which doesn't seem astronomical, but these are frontier settlers. The only thing that takes care of their farm is them. So a lot of these guys are ready to bail. Well, you have some firebrands like Isaac Shelby, Severe, and some of these other guys that are not going to cut loose. They're not going to let go. They're going to keep pushing. And I think it's Isaac Shelby that's credited with saying that we're going to follow him right into Cornwallis's camp. Now, what's Cornwallis doing, you might ask at this time? Well, the same day that the rebel force marches out of Sycamore Shoals, coming across the mountains, Cornwallis has defeated the North Carolina militia in what is today's downtown Charlotte, the crossroads of Trade and Tryon Street. That's the original settlement. He's pushed the North Carolina militia out. And some of those guys are actually marching north, west, and then they come into the column right here between Alexander's Ford and the Cowpens. And some of these guys are from today's Gaston County, North Carolina, right up here across the line. And so those guys know for a fact that he's camped on this ridgeline where the last guy is at the end of the trail. That's the battlefield or the site of Kings Mountain. So these commanders, when they get to the Cowpens, they have a dilemma. You got men who want to go home. They know he's closer to Cornwallis, and the firebrands will not let him go. We're going to keep pushing. So they make a decision that I think is a lot of the undoing of Patrick Ferguson. They break into two columns, and the men that have horses that are not lame or horses that can ride and are ready for the campaign or for a faster ride leave out about 9 o'clock at night in a pouring rain. Now, can you imagine doing that today? I mean, we have, actually rain gear that keeps you dry. We have, lights, night vision goggles, all that stuff. These guys in a pouring rain are leaving out with none of that stuff. So they're not traveling at the speed of a horse column in the daytime, but they are moving faster. After these 900 or so men depart the Cowpens, you have another 400 or 500 men on foot. Some people will say that the foot column never leaves Alexander's Ford, but other ones will make it sound like they left after the horse column marched out. So all night on the 6th of October and into the 7th of October, these guys are traveling in a pouring rain. As you get up into the morning, they approach the Broad River. The rain kind of tapers off, and they do cross the Broad River about dawn. So now they're not that far from their quarry, which they know where he is. Again, they've had solid intelligence now. They know where he's camped. So this map is the same map that's in your brochure. If you come to the park, the Broad River is off to the left. You can see modern Highway 85 up in the left corner. The white line going across the top with the little glary spot on the left is the North South Carolina. Until 1770, this part of South Carolina was North Carolina, but South Carolina now. And so almost directly above the park up in North Carolina is the town of Kings Mountain. Over to the right, would be the town of Gastonia going up 85 and Charlotte a little farther away. So the column crosses the Broad River about dawn. They take a break. They reelect William Campbell as their commander. Nobody writes why they reelected him, but they did. And then they began moving. They had some help from a young guy so they could cross the Broad River safely without being worried about an ambush. They actually come to a cabin somewhere not too far from the Broad River. And this same young guy goes up to the cabin, goes in and acts like he's a loyalist looking for Patrick Ferguson. And once the family's comfortable with him, the wife tells exactly where he is. So he's up the road on this ridge line right here, that straight area on the map. So what they call the Overmountain Victory Trail now would actually follow more or less the roadbed of Highway 29, which is down here, and the roadbed of this road called Antioch, and the park road coming into the park, and then skirt north of the ridgeline and cross the ridgeline on in a cut where the trail goes today. So to orient you in the national park, this is the national park boundary, the dark green area. This blue area is the state park of the same name. That's a story that goes back to the 1930s, why you have two parks with the same name. And up above the line, you have Crowder's Mountain in North Carolina. Kings Mountain is actually referred to at the time in the 18th century as Kings Mountain, Little Kings Mountain, or Kings Hill. We're the lower, more eroded away end of a outcropping in the Piedmont that's about 12 miles long, I guess, maybe 13 miles long, that geologists call the Kings Mountain Range or Kings Mountain Belt, I guess, after the battle or after the ridge line, which was called Kings Mountain by a landowner. It's not the King of England. So the place where the battle occurs is along this ridge line in an area that is accessible because the road goes right through there. You get up into Crowder's Mountain, no road can cross in that time because of the elevation and steep slopes and all that. And then and it's a known location because this ridge line. Okay, let me find the mouse again. This ridge line right here, the straight area right there on the trail, is the top of the ridge. It's a hunting camp. So people know about this place, and it's along a well-traveled route. So is that why Ferguson's here? Nobody writes it, but he does write that he's on an elevation when he gets here, and he defies. This is a tradition thing. They say he defies, the Almighty God to push him off the mountain. He's here. He's the king of the mountain, and he defies God to push him off the mountain. So I'll argue that he might have something there because he's still there. So the rebel force comes in this way following the loyalist force who arrived here on the day before. The same day they were at the Cowpens, the loyalist force had already set up camp here. So they're in striking distance and they're very close now. So about an hour before the battle starts, maybe 2 in the afternoon, the rebel forces are getting very close. And they know the lay of the land because your Lincoln County guys from up here, William Chronicle, Frederick Hambright, these guys know the lay of the land here. A couple of them had been here the summer before for several weeks, so they know all the creeks and trails around. So the rebel force arrives at some distance. Some sources will say 200 yards, which I don't think he could hide 900 horses 200 yards away, even if the ground was sopping wet, which they say it was. But I think it's a little farther away, but nobody really knows where the horses were tied up. But somehow they tied up 900 horses, selected a handful of men to stay with the animals, and they began surrounding the ridge line. So about an hour later at 3 o'clock, the first shots fired on the 7th of October. So let's move to another map. So on the that's a little bit closer view. I should have been using that one. So the rebel force would come in from the upper left of your screen and surround, following these dotted lines of march, the ridge line. So the ridge line is described as about 500 to 600 yards long, depending on which source you use, and that's about what it is today, and maybe 100 yards wide at the widest, which is the northeast end. That's probably a little less than that today. And this map has some of the main rebel commands with the commander's name. Now, it's kind of a fancy map because it shows nice smooth slopes. It shows all the soldiers in nice precise lines, which is not the case. But it is a forested area. The descriptions of the time are that it seems to be like it's an old growth forest, large trees, not much undergrowth. You could see a long way in the woods, presumably till the shooting started. This map, the one you're looking at now, comes from the first detailed treatment of the Battle of Kings Mountain. It's an original 1881 printing of the Draper book called Kings Mountain and Its Heroes, which I took that picture here just a few days ago out of the book in the power. So let's get to a map that actually I think is a little more accurate. So this is the map that would be in your park brochure. And you can see they moved John Sevier from down here, the south side of the ridgeline, to the northwest end of the ridgeline. And what was called, what was under Hambright here is now under Chronicle, this command. This is the Lincoln County guys. Williams has Lacey, another South Carolina guy next to him, and then Cleveland has been moved around this way a little bit. So for the makeup of your forces, and depending on if you have an ancestor here, it doesn't necessarily mean they're with the guy that's commanding the militia from their area. But Sevier's command is Western North Carolina. Shelby is Western North Carolina. Williams is South Carolina. Cleveland is the Wilkes County, Surrey County of North Carolina. Chronicle is today's Gaston County. It was Lincoln at the time. Winston is Wilkes County, Surrey County. He's the Elkin guy. He's got a town named after him. up there. Charles McDowell has a younger brother named Joseph McDowell, and this is him. This is Joseph McDowell. He actually commands men that opened the Battle of Cowpens 3 months later. And William Campbell, who is the nominal commander, has about 400 men under his command. Half of them were under the command of his brother, Arthur Campbell. But essentially, you could say that William Campbell has the most men. And some people have put out that Campbell was probably elected in command because he's the only guy not from Virginia. You know how officers fight each other, argue and whatnot. He's the only guy that's not from the Carolinas, so that would make it easier on the command. So it must have worked, I guess. But once the battle begins, Campbell has essentially no command because, they don't have radios. They don't have dispatch riders run around, send messages and whatnot. Every unit is doing their own thing. So again, the battle begins about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Patrick Ferguson is somewhere on the ridgeline. Nobody knows exactly where he is, but he's somewhere on the ridgeline, and he gets a report from his second in command that this guy, Abraham de Peister, had just visited the pickets and all's quiet, and a shot rings out, and that's the beginning of the battle. So William Campbell writes later on that his men were in action a full 10 minutes before any other Patriot unit was fighting. All the scholars will say that within about 10 minutes, all the rebel forces were engaged. Winston for sure, and possibly Chronicle, maybe Cleveland, maybe even McDowell, some of these men stayed on horseback longer to get in position faster. But it does appear that the Loyalists are caught unprepared. They're up on the ridgeline. They're in a camp. They've got weapons stacked. They're not prepared for an assault. So the battle again begins about 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the southwest end of the ridgeline, but within a few minutes, it's general all around the ridgeline. Now, if you want to talk about rifles, muskets, smoothbores, rifled weapons, advantages, disadvantages, that's a whole nother talk. But essentially, Kings Mountain's got an interesting aspect of it in that the Loyalists, who are backcountry settlers, you would presume a good many of them would have some kind of rifled weapon, but they're being armed by the king through Patrick Ferguson. When he leaves Charleston, South Carolina, he's got wagons full of muskets, and he's arming his men to fight, to be like the British Army, and he's training them to fight like the British Army, like an organized force in the 18th century. The rebel force, on the other hand, seems to be armed predominantly with rifled weapons. Some of the sources will say every man's got the same rifle, the Jacob Dickert rifle from Pennsylvania, but that can't happen. So in our museum, if you could visit it, we do have a Dutch musket that was carried by a patriot from Virginia. And so it's carried by a guy named Jacob Beeler. So when the battle begins about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, it begins a seesaw back and forth, up and down each part of the ridgeline. The Loyalists on the western end of the ridge do mount organized bayonet assaults. Patrick Ferguson has a force that's all militia, except for about 100 of these guys that are provincial soldiers. They're essentially the same as British Army, but they're soldiers raised in the provinces. And they even argue on their uniforms. Some say they're wearing red uniforms like the regular Army guys do. Other ones saying they're wearing raggedy green uniforms that they were stitching up when they were sailing down to Savannah. So who knows? Either way, they're his organized force, more disciplined force, and they do seem to mount at least 2 bayonet advances up and down the slopes, maybe 3. There is a guy in the Lincoln County guys here on the Chronicle who is bayoneted through the hand, and the bayonet goes into his thigh, and so the weapon is stuck through his hand into his thigh. So can you imagine that guy having a story to tell his grandkids? He lives, and we'll talk about him kind of at the end of it if I don't get cut off beforehand. So the battle lasts about an hour. The rebels get on the ridge line on the southwest end first, begin pushing Loyalists down the ridge line, as well as the units on the northeast end of the ridge line, gradually gaining ground. At some point, the Loyalists are squashed into a pocket, into this widest area of the ridge line, and when they were getting fire from one direction and any fire from the other side of the ridgeline was way over their head, now they're getting fire from both sides, from in front and behind. And a little bit of anxiety, desperation starts setting in, fear. And there's a couple of attempts to put up a white flag. Well, Patrick Ferguson has not ordered that. And he very quickly cuts those flags down with a saber with his left arm. He's a right-handed guy, does not have the use of his right arm. And he knocks these flags down. So nobody really gives you a super description that jives with everybody else's description of Patrick Ferguson's death. But some sources will say as many as 25 weapons got leveled at him. So did a gust of wind come up somewhere in this end of the ridge line, blow a hole in the smoke, rebel units getting up where they can see across the ridge. But as many as 25 weapons got leveled at Patrick Ferguson. A bunch of them go off. And Ferguson, who is on a horse, is hit 7, 8, or 9 times and almost immediately flops off of the horse. His boot hangs up in a stirrup and the horse takes off. Did the horse get hit? Was something on Ferguson's body, a piece of equipment? Did it stick the horse? I mean, who knows? But the horse bolts. So Abraham de Peister, who is the second in command, sees the shooting, the killing, and all that still going on. He knows the handwriting's on the wall, and he puts the white flag up, and it stays up. It still takes a few minutes to wind down. So this battle, which started about 3 in the afternoon, is over an hour later. All the sources will say an hour to an hour and 5 minutes. So it doesn't take that long in the whole scheme of things. But the loyalists suffer pretty severely. Is it because of their tactics, the fact they were on the ridgeline unprepared? Who knows? It's probably a combination of things. So the loyalists are corralled into a pocket roughly where the United States monument is right here. That's the widest area of the ridgeline. That's where the surrender takes place. Their weapons are taken away. Hats are off. So you know who a loyalist is because he's not wearing a hat. Patriot might be dressed just like him, but he's wearing a hat. So they say that the loyalists had a pine sprig in their hat to identify them as loyalists. The patriots had a piece of paper in their hat to identify them as patriots. I don't know. Nobody wrote who brought all the paper, or did everybody carry a piece of paper around? I don't know that. That's I think an odd aspect of it. I think it got said and then repeated, but that's me. That's maybe not true. But anyway, there's a marker there on the upper right end of the ridge line that shows where Ferguson was killed. And some people will argue that point. I think he probably killed up here somewhere and the horse gets stopped down there. But that's essentially where the ridge line drops off, and the period road would come across the ridge going over toward the Catawba River. So Patrick Ferguson supposedly falls here, and the ridgeline drops off all around, and he's buried right down here in a ravine. So the trail would drop off pretty steep. It's still a smooth trail, but some people have trouble walking it. So the battle winds down about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The rebel forces who have been traveling, you could say, since the morning of the day before, are going to stay on the battlefield overnight. They allow Ferguson's men to bury him with whatever honors they can do. There's different accounts of it. One of them says that his men were allowed to wash and prepare his body for burial. Another one says he was buried in a cowhide with a Virginia Sal. He had 2 lady servants. They're both named Virginia, and the lady called Virginia Sal is actually buried with him too. So he's buried here not too far from where he fell. So the next day, the rebel force marches out. They leave all the wounded that can't walk and all the dead. There's some poor burials being done, probably not much of a burial at all. There's descriptions of mass graves, but they're mostly on the ground, not in the ground. So you have some people probably coming and getting their relatives or find out what happened to them. But essentially, the loyalists have about 170 that are killed outright during the battle, and about 180 or maybe a little more that are seriously wounded. I'm sure most succumbed in the next few days, if not hours. The Patriots suffer extreme light casualties, 27, 29, 26, some places will say, killed, and about 60 or 65 wounded. And some of those guys, probably, I'm sure some of them had a serious wound and maybe succumbed in the next few days. But overall, it's a very lopsided victory. And what's interesting about the battle is you have about 900 Patriots here that arrived on horseback all around the ridgeline. On the ridgeline, Patrick Ferguson's force is made up of about 900 men. So isn't that an interesting thing? Advancing forces in the 18th century would prefer a 2 or 3 to 1 advantage in manpower. But here you have a force that defeats an equal number of force that has the higher position, the higher terrain. So, you'll have the Army guy or the Marine guy come in here and say, well, how were they defeated? They had the high ground, but it doesn't always work that way. It does appear that Ferguson's force are trying to use more like regular linear battle tactics, firing on commands and mass volleys, where the rebel forces are using Indian-style tactics. A guy named Alexander Chesney, who's wounded and captured in the battle, he leaves in his journal an account of it, and he attributes their defeat to the heavily wooded terrain, hiding places, and their loose order Indian-style manner of fighting. So that tends to be the frontier style. And who did the settlers learn that from? Probably not the English, probably the Indians. So we have the defeat at the Battle of Kings Mountain. So the rebels are going to march back up into North Carolina. And 4 days later, William Campbell puts a message out. If the harassment and slaughtering of the prisoners does not stop, he's going to do something to stop it. So the prisoners are getting treated very badly. 2 days later, 6 days after the battle at Biggerstaff's plantation, or old Chimneys up in North Carolina, they have a trial, and they try about 42 of the prisoners of about 690 and sentence 32 of them to death, and they start executing them by hanging. And they execute at least 9 before Sevier, Shelby, and some of these guys say that's enough killing, and they stop. So the next day they continue marching, and the goal is to get these prisoners into a stockade somewhere over in Salisbury or away from the British. So they march off. Now the problem with the whole activity after the battle is what was a frontier force of individualists gets welded into a disciplined machine during the march, and in the aftermath it almost falls apart. They become frontier individualists again. A lot of these units, small units, are disappearing almost immediately after the battle. Many of them are branching off and going home during the march. So the prisoners are doing the same thing. A lot of prisoners are getting away. A lot of prisoners that I'm not so angry at you now. You know, I might know you. I might know your family. 2 days later, you know, why don't you slip off at the next creek? There's an example of six brothers, I think, and one of them fakes an illness, and his brothers carry him to a creek along the route of march, and they all manage to escape. There's another example of a prisoner during the march who tries to escape, and he's shot through the body. That's the description. And the next day at like 5 o'clock in the morning, they execute him. That doesn't say how they did it, but you know, it's a harsh life on the frontier, and even days after the battle, they're treating prisoners, some of them very harshly. Now, 3 weeks after the battle, Benjamin Cleveland is the last rebel commander that's still in command of any prisoners. He's up in the Moravian settlements up here in what's today's modern Winston-Salem, and he transfers command of the remaining prisoners over to a local militia commander. And that's the end of the Battle of Kings Mountain as far as the contact with both forces and the handling of prisoners after the battle. So with that said, we'll
I think we may have lost him.
I think he hung up on himself.
We'll see. He may come back on in just a minute here, because we worked on that some this afternoon, or I did with him. Okay, well, I suggest maybe we go on with the business at hand here. And if he comes back in, we'll see who this is right here. Quick. No. Okay. If he comes back in, well, we can maybe continue. We'll see how that goes. Oh, wait a minute. Here he comes. I think.
Tom, you're showing him muted up there. Try to unmute him.
Let's see, can I do that like that? Let's see here. Chat. Ask him to unmute.
I think he just left, it said.
Yeah, he may be having trouble now getting back on. Let's see. Well, rats. We'll give him a minute or two more and then we'll go on.
He had a very interesting presentation.
Yeah. He was fixing to get into the monuments and everything there. He had some pictures of the different monuments and things that were quite interesting, but okay. Well, why don't we see if we can go on? If he comes back in, we'll see what we need to do at that point. But let's see if I can do something without messing up here. Let's see. Go to that. Share screen, desktop 1. Share. Okay, and then come up here. Okay. Okay, so we'll move on along here. I'll talk to him tomorrow. And it was quite interesting, though. I hadn't heard all of that. So anyway, we have a certificate that if he comes back in a little bit, we'll present to him. Otherwise, I'll get that mailed to him. And again, maybe we can get him to do a part 2 here at some point in the future from where he was at. Okay, let's see here. So I guess we'll go on to the old business here. Let's see here, yeah. So basically, relative to the business, we've got our 126th annual state convention. It's going to be a virtual meeting. I resent yesterday. I resent the copy of President Petty's mail to all the members. You should have gotten that mail from President Petty about the annual 126th annual convention. If you didn't, you're not on a basically a list that you get it from. If you didn't get it, let me know and we'll work through it, and I'll help you get on the list so you'll get the emails from the state society. Basically, all the members are welcome. It's a great opportunity sitting in the comfort of your own home, understanding a lot about how the state operates, the committees, and they'll be report out of the committees and everything. So it's a quite interesting process. I went last year and I really enjoyed the whole thing. So we learned a lot about the state society there. It's on basically there'll be an opening speech on the Friday the 16th, about an hour and a half or so, from our President General of the society, and then basically Saturday, then we'll have meetings probably from somewhere around 9 to 4. $10 fee. Basically, if you take that email, I sent you the link, you can click on it. If you pay via PayPal, it's $11. We get a certain number of delegates that can vote. Please let me know if you registered. I'd like to make you a delegate so we can basically have as many as we can there that are voting on the issues. So anyway, please consider doing that. I think it's definitely worth your time to do it. Old business, our next meeting is going to be on April 15th. I'm saying via Zoom. We in our executive committee meeting, we started looking at possible options to do a hybrid meeting where we could have people come in on Zoom and also then have people in person. I'm working through that and to see what we can do. I actually attended a hybrid meeting of the Edmond Terrell chapter yesterday, and so I've got a view of how they were conducting that. So we'll see as we go forward when we can hopefully get back together here before too terribly long. Again, the meeting, the program is going to be The Untold Stories of the American Revolution by a gentleman named Carl Flowers. I've heard this presentation. It's quite good. He's sort of he mixes the history of the Revolution with some untold stories, and he also talks about the traits and characteristics of the people then and how you can apply those, or they are still being applied today to people who are successful in businesses who are successful. So it's sort of a mix of old and new. I really enjoyed it when I heard it a year or two ago. So anyway, I would appreciate if you consider coming and listening to that. I think it'll be a good one. Okay, so new business, approval of the minutes. The minutes are out on the website for our February meeting. Do I hear everybody unmute, by the way, if you're going to talk? Yeah, anyway. So do I hear a motion to accept the meetings as written?
So moved.
Is that David?
Yeah.
David Kinsey. Okay. Do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Mark McCraw. Okay. Is there any discussion? Okay. Hearing none. Could all of those, let me get them where I can see this here now. All of those in favor of basically approving the minutes as written, please indicate by raising your hand and saying yes.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So I think that the yeses have it. Okay. Motion approved. Ralph Thompson, are you on tonight?
I haven't seen him.
I haven't either. I wonder what happened to him. Oh, well. Okay, so I don't know that we've had any changes. The last time I talked to him, we'll just postpone that, and next time we'll get him to give us both of those. So we'll just go forward from there. I don't think we have any. David, do you, other than you, David, are you the only Texas Society officer on right now?
Well, you got Ted, your district.
Oh, Ted, I'm staring you right in the face. Sorry, Ted. Ted, do you have any comments for us?
I would suggest that anybody thinking about getting a uniform, get one. Because if we get the Medal of Honor Museum over in Arlington, we're going to need people in uniform.
That's right.
Because there'll be a bunch of things that we will be doing there.
Yep. In fact, I'm going to, I think, yeah, Mark, I've talked to you about that, getting the lady that we heard the presentation,
Yes.
I guess, with the Arlington chapter, getting her to present to us, because it's going to be quite active. And I think I'm really excited about that. I think we're going to have lots of opportunities there. David, do you have any comments for us?
No, just hope to see everybody at the state meeting. We sent the first round of the reconciliation and national. Waiting to hear back probably tomorrow or so how many mistakes we've got in there, getting that cleaned up. But we should be done with national in the next week or so.
So once you get this reconciled, I assume money might start flowing to the chapters, right?
Well, as soon as I decide what I want to do with it, you
got some other plans?
I got plans, baby.
Oh, great. Okay, David. Oh my
You got Vegas on the horizon.
That's right, Louis.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, do we have any other business from the floor? Okay. Don, could you lead us in our benediction, please?
Yes, let's pray. May the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob bless and keep you. May the Lord grant us nobility of character and compassion for the needy, and bind us in fraternal love until we meet again. Amen.
Thank you. Okay, so David, can you join us in or lead us in the recessional, please?
Sure. Until we meet again, let us remember
our obligation to our forefathers,
who gave us
our Constitution,
Bill of Rights, an independent
Independent Supreme Court
and a
and
nation
a nation of free men.
Okay, well, unless anybody has any other comments. Okay, I'm going to adjourn this meeting. Thank you all for coming, and
There.
sorry we didn't get to hear the rest of that, but
Jim
we probably need to
Johnson
break
did
it.
a picture. You
Thank,
might want to
thank
see
you.
that.
What? I'm sorry, what'd you say?
So Jim Johnson did a picture of Lamar. I don't know if you want to send that with the certificate somehow.
I would love to.
Cool.
Hey, Jim.
Yes, I'll
Awesome.
I'll send it to you.
Okay, wonderful.
I'll do a copy of it and send it to you.
Wonderful. How are you doing, Jim?
Good, good.
Good.
I had my last COVID vaccination yesterday.
Okay.
So
I think they said
you.
2 weeks out from that, and you'll be a free man again, right?
Oh, right.
Good thing y'all think-
I'm already a free man. I've already been through that, both of them, and for a while here. So that's a good feeling, isn't it, Jim?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay, guys. Hey, thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming tonight, and we'll see you again next month.
All right.
Great. Thank y'all.
Yeah. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.